2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 8 through 9. I might need to come down just a tad bit. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 8 through 9. It reads like this: We are troubled on every side, yet not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Cast down, but not destroyed. Amen. I hope y'all saw that for yourself on the screens up here or in your own Bible, because I have a message for you today, and I want to use the title, A New Perspective. A new perspective. Can y'all say it so I know y'all hear me? A new perspective. I've come to realize that life is all about perspective. There are many things in life that when we change our perspective, we start to realize that things aren't always what they seem to be. There is a word for this. It's called an illusion. An illusion is simply something that seems to be one way, but actually is not. But many of us have a difficult time deciphering between illusions and reality. And because we have a hard time struggling with those illusions, what happens is we start to allow our illusions to become our reality. And I can actually empathize with this, because we've always been kind of conditioned to believe what you see. Illusions are things that look to be one way. And so it's hard not to allow your illusions to become your reality. Okay, I'll stick to the script. I thought I was going to have some people agree with me a little more. Maybe y'all don't know what illusions look like in your life. But when you look at your phone after a busy day and you see you ain't got no missed calls, not a text message, ain't nobody thought about me all this time, the illusion says, don't nobody care about me. And because that's the illusion, that's what it looks like, that's what it even feels like, you allow that to become the reality. Don't nobody care about me. But the truth is, it's just an illusion. Maybe the truth is, they busy just like you. I know y'all heard this before. Phones work both ways. So while you sitting there allowing the illusion to look like nobody cares for you, they probably looking at their phone saying, my mama even text me. It's an illusion. Because you can't determine what is actually the fact. What about, here, I'm going to go deep. What about when you pray and you don't get an immediate answer to your prayer? Your problem is not immediately fixed. It can look like God don't care about my situation. God ain't listening to me. God ain't checking for me. Who am me? Who are I? God ain't thinking about me, because I've been praying for this for months, for years, and I'm still in the same old condition. He's saying you better check yourself, because it's just an illusion. But we have to realize the reason we struggle with illusion so much is because there are people in the world that are illusionists. And we have an adversary, the devil, who's a master at illusions. That small voice in your head when things don't look like they're going to turn out, that's the illusionist saying, you need to stop praying. You ought to leave that alone. God ain't about to do that for you. As a matter of fact, why would he do anything for you? He's working his illusion. There is a famous illusionist by the name of Houdini. Okay, for the new age people, this would be like David Blaine or Chris Angel, right? Houdini was the David Blaine and Chris Angel of his time. And he was a master illusionist. And he always had this one trick that he would go to. Houdini would always bind himself with handcuffs or with chains, and he would do something like get in a box and be thrown in the ocean. Or he would get in some kind of water tank and hang upside down while he's chained up. In some kind of way, he would get out. It was an illusion. He would make people think that he was so good, and he had some kind of magic, some kind of superpowers that we didn't have, that he could get out of this situation that we normal people couldn't. But the reason it's an illusion is because it's not reality. See, what we didn't see was that every time Houdini was bound, he had a key in his hand. Or sometimes he had it already in the box that he was going to get in, but on the outside, all you see is a man chained and getting out free, and you say, ooh, he's a bad boy, and it's all an illusion. Okay. Houdini knew, just like the devil knows, that the trick to make you believe the illusion is to hide the key. If I hide the key, then you believe that what you see is real. See, they're not going to show you what the reality is. They're not going to tell you what the truth is. So when the devil starts talking to you, showing you what your situation looks like, he's hiding the key, and the key is Jesus. Yeah, you ain't got no money to pay your bills. You may have to start looking to get up out of there. You're not going to make it. You may not get that car you've been praying for. You may not get that man or that woman you've been praying for, and he's hiding the key. And as a matter of fact, I've watched some America's Got Talent and stuff, and sometimes they show you the keys, but it's never the real key on there. See, the devil will show you some keys. He says, see, the key to getting out your situation. Have you thought about Tinder? Have you thought about Christian Mingle? He's showing you all the other keys. Have you thought about some get-rich-quick schemes to pay these bills down? But he ain't never going to say, have you tried Jesus? Why? Because an illusionist is going to hide the key. Now, I'm going to give y'all the actual definition of an illusion because I like it better than mine. An illusion is something that is wrongly perceived or interpreted by our senses to be true. Wrongly perceived. Perceived is another way of saying perception or perspective. And the thing I love about this definition is it says it's wrongly perceived or interpreted by our senses. See, I said earlier, we think we can rely on our senses. But I've learned by now that I can't trust myself. Y'all ever watch Fear Factor? Sometimes they blindfold people and make them feel things to try to figure out what it is. And 9 times out of 10, they will never guess what it actually is. Why? Because your senses can't fully interpret something in order to get to the truth. Smell. Sometimes I'm in my office and my wife is cooking, and I could bet my life savings I know what she's cooking, because I know that smell. Then I sit at the table and say, this ain't what I smell. See, I couldn't smell enough to get to the truth. My senses couldn't interpret enough to get to the actual truth. And the same thing happens with our eyes. And this is the one we got to be careful with. Because we all think that what we see is what we believe. See, sometimes, I ain't going to say y'all, I ain't going to say me, but sometimes people can see things and they jump to conclusions. You ain't going to believe what I saw. And now you're telling somebody what you saw, and you don't even know if what you saw is to be true. Because even when you see for yourself, you can't really know what the truth is, because your senses is not what God uses to determine truth. Okay. The most common illusion is optical illusions. And that's the most common one because it's the easiest to manipulate. I know you may not agree right now, but stick with me. The easiest thing to manipulate is what you see. As good as I look right now, I can have a penny in my pocket. You ever seen somebody say, boy, they look like money? They probably the brokest person in the room. Why? Because what you see is not what you can trust. The only thing you can trust is God. But watch this. Optical illusions. It's the most common type of illusion because it's the easiest that the devil uses to manipulate us. Don't believe me? He's been doing it since the beginning of time. It wasn't our sense of feeling or touching or smelling. No, it was the eyes. Can I read y'all Genesis chapter 3? Verse 4, they in the garden and the serpent come up to Eve and he says, unto the woman, you shall not surely die. For God does know that in the day you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be open, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Watch this. Optical illusion. Verse 6, here comes Eve. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and the tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And watch this, verse 7 says, and the eyes of them both were open. Can I break it down? The devil convinced Eve that if you just look for yourself, you'll see that ain't nothing wrong with this fruit. If you just trust your senses and use the eyes that God gave you, you can see that this fruit ain't going to do nothing to you. So it says she saw with her eyes. And she looked at it and said, it don't look poison. As a matter of fact, it looked pretty good. So because she trusted what she saw, the devil was able to manipulate her sense of sin to get her to sin. And what I love is it says after they ate, their eyes were open, which meant that what they saw before was a lie. Okay, y'all didn't catch it. What they saw before was this fruit ain't going to do what God said it was going to do to me. God said, if I eat this, surely I'm going to die. Well, I'm looking at it, and I don't see no death on it. But after they ate it, their eyes were open to realize that you were just manipulated by what you saw. This is why we got to know our word. Because the world is going to try to get you to rely on your senses. The world is going to try to get you to stay woke. Open your eyes and see for yourself. And you say, I do see. Because I see by faith. Okay, let me tell y'all. Paul did say in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, we walk by faith, not by. So why we trust in what we see so much? As a matter of fact, Hebrews tells us that faith is the evidence of things unseen. It's not what we see. It's the evidence of things that we can't see. What's the point of having faith if you can just see everything? Watch this. If you're not careful, the illusions in your life can cause you to become delusional. You like that? Okay. I've seen it time and time again. People let the illusions in their life cause them to become delusional. And when you see them, you think, what in the world is wrong with them? You got kids that believe that their parents care nothing about them, yet they walking around in $500 shoes, got on a $300 backpack, got a Tempur-Pedic mattress, got air and heat at home, got 3 meals a day, and their parents are working 60 to 70 hours every week to make that happen for them, but they're delusional and they say, my parents don't love me. Now, watch this. I understand why they believe their parents don't love them. Because the devil is using the illusion of what they see. When I get home from school, ain't nobody there. Ain't no food on the table. And I got to sit here for hours until somebody get home. They ain't thinking about me. They don't love me. But the reality is they ain't home because they somewhere working to get you some old shoes, some old backpacks and everything else you want. Man, but the devil says, you see, ain't nobody here. Don't nobody care about you. And so they walk around delusional, hating their parents, hating everybody else, because the devil did the same thing to them that he did to Eve. He said, won't you look around and see that don't nobody care about you? I've seen it in the church. People grow up in the church. They had every Sunday school, every worship. They had every choir rehearsal, every Bible study. And after a while, they've been praying and praying for something to happen. And when it don't happen, they leave the church. They stop praying. They stop reading. Why? Because the devil says, won't you look around and see that God ain't coming to your rescue? God ain't doing nothing for you. This church ain't doing nothing for you. And so they leave the church, walk away from God, and now they live in delusional. Because they think they can do better for themselves on their own. But the reality is the devil is just a master illusionist. But the proper solution to illusions is to have a proper perspective. There are two things that I love to do. I love to be on the airplane, and I love to be on the cruise ship. Not because I'm on vacation, that's only half, but the reason I love being on those two types of transportation is because they both offer a new perspective. When you get on the plane, and I love when you either taking off or landing, because when you're taking off or landing, you get to see the city that you were just in. And I don't know about y'all, but when you 30,000 feet in the air and you look down on the city that you were just in, you get a new perspective. Because when you're on the ground in the city, everything is bigger than you. Everything is better than you. The buildings are taller than you. The people walking past you seem more important than you. And everything is just overwhelmingly bigger than you are. But the moment you get 3,000 or 30,000 feet in the air, you look down and just see how insignificant it all is. All because your perspective changed. The city didn't change. You didn't even change. Your position just changed. So now you get to see it from a different angle. When you're over this city, you get to look down and say, why am I worried about a little car note? Why am I worried about some groceries? Look at all this. God owns all of this. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And you start to think about how insignificant all that is. As a matter of fact, when you up there, you get bold. You say, boy, God can give me all of that if he wanted to. That ain't nothing. When you're on a cruise ship, you out on this boat and there's hundreds of miles every way before you get to land. You don't see nothing but water. And when you start looking, you say, boy, God did all this? I'm telling you, you get spiritual when you're on the cruise ship looking at that water. Say, my Lord. Y'all laughing because y'all know what I'm talking about. You stand at the end, you say, God is amazing. He said, I wasn't amazing on Tuesday. When you was complaining about everything, but you get a new perspective. And when you start thinking about it, you say, boy, God created all this. God is maintaining all of this. And then you get real spiritual. You say, matter of fact, this water that we're sitting on right now is so deep that a whole nother world can be under us right now. This all just gets put into perspective. But the problem for most of us is that our perspective is defined by our current position. You see, some of us, we can see God as amazing on the cruise ship, but we can't see him as amazing on 42nd and Post. We see God as amazing when we're 30,000 feet up, but we don't see him as amazing when we're laying in a hospital bed. All because your position changed, your perspective about God has changed. And Paul is saying, no, you got to hold your perspective regardless of your position. Some people can only see God as in the blessing business when he in their business. When you pull up in your car and everybody say, ooh, you say God's in the blessing business. But when you have to stop 2 times for your car to cool down on the way to church. And you get here and they say, well, I'm glad to see you. And it was a struggle. Why did your perspective change? Because your position changed. And God says, man, I can't bless you with something if you keep changing your perspective every time I change your position. See, you keep thinking that your position is something that you got control of, but I'm still in control of it. So I allowed you to have that old janky car so that you can bless me and praise me for having it. Oh, so I knew y'all wasn't going to praise God on that one. See, some of us can see the bright side when the light is shining on us. But the moment a little darkness come in, woe is me. Everybody got free tickets to the pity party. Some of us can only say God is able when we get to the light at the end of the tunnel. But Paul says it's time to change your perspective. You know what? I'm glad that Paul wrote these words here. You know, he said, we're troubled on every side. Yeah, we perplexed and we persecuted, cast down, but we not destroyed. Boy, I'm so glad I didn't write that. Because y'all would eat me up. See, y'all know how people work. And y'all do too. You ever tried to encourage somebody that was down? And they got a rebuttal for everything you say. You tell them it's going to be okay. They give you 50 reasons why they think it ain't. You tell them God will make a way. They tell you all the times they prayed and he never showed up. You tell them God can comfort them and they say, you couldn't possibly know how I feel. You ain't been in my shoes. That's why I'm glad I ain't write it. Paul wrote this, and I'm glad he wrote it because I don't know anybody that has been thrown in jail for doing the right thing. I don't know anybody that has been beaten and stoned half to death for doing the right thing, and I don't know anybody that has been dragged out to the edge of the city to lay there and die, but Paul has, and after all that he went through, he still says, although we're troubled on every side, we are not destroyed. Say, you don't know my story. He said, I don't have to because you ain't been through what I've been through. And since I've been through more hell than you have, I'm sitting here letting you know that God is still able to turn your situation around because if he did it for me, he can do it for you. See, Paul says, we are troubled on every side, yet not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Cast down, but not destroyed. Paul wasn't giving some motivational speech. He wasn't simply telling us what God is going to do for us because of what he thinks. He was telling us what he knows based on his resume. Watch this. Paul had people hunting him down like a dog. He had people throwing him under the jail. He had people stoning him and beating him. And at one point, he even got bit by a snake. But every time he had some trouble, God had a solution. God had some help. When he was stoned, he got up and went on to the next city and kept on preaching. When he was thrown in jail, he prayed until the gate swung open. And when the snake bit him, he just shook it off and kept on preaching. And then he came here to tell us, although you're going to face some trouble in your life, I've been there, I've done that, and God is still able to turn it around. But we have a corrupted perspective. And I'm going to show y'all how we have a corrupted perspective. When we were kids, we had the right perspective. I ain't going to say we, I'm going to say me. Because I was a church boy, and I had the right perspective about God. So much so that I had a perspective about the church, about the pastor, and even about elders. We respected the church because our perspective was, you better, or God gonna get you. And what I love is that your perspective is what you believe, and you know what somebody believes by what they do. So we had a perspective about the church, the pastor, and the elders, and it was what we believed, and it showed in what we did. So when we were playing outside or at the church or anything, you don't use certain language. You don't talk about certain subjects. As a matter of fact, we were so churched up, we wouldn't spit on the church grounds. If we out playing basketball and got a spit or something, got some gum, we would go across the street. Got any church kids in here? We were taught that the church is holy ground. So if you get a little something up in there, you'll go across the street just to spit it out. And if somebody did it, all the kids would be like, boy, don't be spitting on the church ground. All them visiting church kids be like, hey, it's holy ground. Okay, y'all ain't grew up in the church like me. When the pastor came in our presence, I remember our Sunday school, we had to stand up every time he came in. I don't care if he was going to the bathroom. If we saw that bald head, because we were taught to respect. We were taught to honor. As a matter of fact, even as kids, if we had $1 or something, we were taught to put a little dollar in his hand or something. Right? And we were taught also that he was God's chosen. So every time he walked in the room, we felt like God just walked in. Not because he's God, but that's God's man. And so as even kids, we had the right perspective. I know this don't happen no more. But if there was somebody with a little gray in their head, if they said, boy, you better, you better. But nowadays, you ain't my mama. We have a corrupted perspective. Why? Because the older we get, the easier it becomes for the devil to get you. Ain't that something? See, y'all think the older you get, the wiser you get. No. Because the wiser you think you are, the closer you are to the devil. Oh, that's a quote. But watch this. I'm not making a point because it's not just the church. It's not just the pastor. It's not just the elders. We have a corrupted perspective about God. See, we used to think, I remember when we as kids, I'm going to give y'all insight to a church boy's life. When I was a kid, my perspective about God was that he could do anything. So much so, y'all laugh with me, not at me. I used to sit in my room and look at a lamp and pray for God to move the lamp. Y'all laughing, but I believed he could move the lamp. But over time, the older you get, God can't move that lamp. I'm stepping on toes because it got quiet. You mean the same God that moved mountains can't move a little lamp? And I'm using an extreme example of when I was a kid, but the same God that is able to change your life around, he can't fix a little situation you got going on. Because over time, we stop believing that he's that kind of God. What I would give to have the same faith as a little boy sitting looking at the lamp. Because that's the type of faith you need to do what God needs you to do. That's the same type of perspective. See, God knows our thoughts. He knows our heart. And he knows what you know you don't believe he can do. Think about that thing that you've been doubting that God can actually do. And you try to justify it in your mind. I know God can do it, but... The most powerful tool I've learned in my Christian journey is how to replace the word but with the word and. I know God can do it, and I've seen him do it before, and if he did it before, he can do it again, and if he did it for somebody else, he can do it for me, and if he did it for me, he can do it for my kids, and you better take butts out your conversation. Because God knows what you believe. He knows what you see. He knows what you think. And he's saying your perspective about me is all jacked up. Okay. I'm going to close. Paul says, in this life, as you strive to live for God, you will be troubled on every side. Perplexed, persecuted, and cast down. And I know that might not sound very appealing to you, but that's only because I only read one side of the coin. So if I can present it to you in today's language, I want to close by using this one word, although. Although. We can read this same scripture and just put the word although in there, and maybe it'll trigger something in you to start giving God praise regardless of what your situation looks like. So as a child of God, trouble will come. People will attack you. The devil will entice you. Illusions will try to trick you. But let these words sit in your spirit that although we are troubled on every side, we ain't worried about it. Although we are perplexed and don't always understand, we don't get bent out of shape. Although we are persecuted and lied on and talked about and accused, God will never leave us nor forsake us. Although we may be cast down and feel like we're broken and beyond repair, we have a new perspective that sees God as our ever-present help, a refuge in a time of trouble. You need to think about this text with the word although. So the next time that you're persecuted, the next time you feel down, the next time you feel in despair, just say, although I got to deal with this, I serve a God that is greater than this. Amen. Amen. God bless you.